If you want to really challenge what exactly you can get a car to climb up, then rock crawling is probably the sport for you. I'm here with Rodney from Lasernut to find out a little bit more about the sport. I guess, Rodney, there's a bit of a hint in the name, but rock crawling, give us a high-level view of what that sport is and how it's judged, what you're trying to achieve.
Well, in extreme rock crawling, like for this car here, what they do is they'll find rocks that most people would look at and think that you could barely climb them with a person. And they'll set up cones and courses on these rocks, and they take these cars and they go see who can drive up them. So what it's become now is no longer who can get up it, but who can get up it the fastest. So it used to be, maybe, oh, this guy couldn't get up that ledge. And, now it's everybody can get up it, but I can get up it in 20 seconds. So to make it harder, they put up cones, they set up courses, and you got to make sure you don't hit cones, you don't back up, and all kinds of different things that penalize you for time. And that's what really makes it interesting and hard.
Now, obviously, from the car we've got behind us, I'm guessing suspension articulation is going to be critical in climbing up these rocks. But what other properties are you looking at in building a custom one-off unlimited class car that's going to be competitive?
Yeah, so you want to keep your weight low. You want to keep the chassis small. As you can see, this thing, it's a single seater. It's really narrow. We actually take the motor, we set it at 15 degrees, we lay it over on its side just to keep the thing as small as possible. Then we want the articulation. We want this thing to be able to drop out. As you can see, we're sitting on 3-foot tall stands, and it can reach down and touch the ground still. So the other parts you really want to make sure is you got nice big tires. We run a 42-inch BFG crawler. And then we run air lockers in front and rear. And we run a transfer case that we can unlock the front and the rear and, use just front tires or rear tires and do digs and different things like that.
Okay, so that sounds like you've got a lot going on from the driver's seat, and not to mention other aspects like rear steer as well. There's a lot going on. How do you sort of learn to drive one of these? How do you know when to lock and unlock a diff? How do you know when to use your rear steer and all of the other functionality you've got going on in this car?
Yeah.
Truck?
Yeah, well, absolutely. When you get to this level, you've been in a car and you've been rock crawling so much that you really understand what you need to do. You also have a spotter during your competition that'll help you guide you, let you know, hey, you need to dig, you need to turn, watch the cone type of things. But it's time behind the wheel. This car has hydraulically adjustable shocks that can allow the vehicle to raise up completely about 22 inches. So it really has a lot going on in there. Like you said, you got front and rear steer and lockers. And
just coming back to some of the aspects you've talked about there, when you talk about these lockers, so this is an air locking differential, so it can be open or you can flick a button and it will be locked essentially like a spool. Why would we not want the differentials to just be locked the entire time? Is this because it makes it harder to turn?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes it harder to turn. In a lot of these courses, you're taking really, really tight turns. You'll have to make a U-turn around a cone, and maybe your left rear tire doesn't move. It just pivots. So you may have to lock up your left rear tire and have all 3 other tires driving you around.
The truck obviously has live axles front and rear. Is this just the only way for rock crawling? Is there any place for independent suspension front and rear? Can you give us the pros and cons on live versus independent?
Yeah, so it's really that's the old time battle of IFS is better than straight axle. Well, to give you kind of a contrast, we also race Ultra 4. So we have an Ultra 4 rock crawler that was really pushed the envelope and was way ahead of its time, and a lot of guys have come along since then, but it was an IFS IRS rock crawler on portals and actually a rock racer. So we do.
You had experience with both.
Exactly. So they're both equally good, but for what this does, straight axle wins every time.
All right, you just used the term portals there as well, and that was with regard to your Ultra 4. This is also running portals. For those maybe not immersed in the off-road world, what's that term mean and why do you use them?
So a portal hub is basically a gear reduction right at the wheel at the end of the axle. And what it does is it gives you a gear reduction, number one. So it's roughly a 2-to-1 gear reduction. So it takes a little bit of load off the rest of your drivetrain, your axles. But also what it does is it brings the center line of that axle up higher. So your axle is actually coming in about 6 inches higher than the center of your tire. Gives you, another.
So just more ground clearance.
Exactly, ground clearance.
You just mentioned a 2-to-1 reduction there. You've got also a 3-speed automatic transmission, I believe.
Correct, yeah.
So obviously torque is key here. We're not really too worried about high speed. What sort of is the maximum speed of one of these when you take all of that gear reduction into account?
Yeah, this will probably do about 8-10 miles an hour max. It's not a fast thing, but it's the most fun you'll have at 2 miles an hour.
All right, so we've got massive multiplication of the engine torque. In terms of that, what is the engine and how do you go about choosing what to put in something like this to be competitive? Is it about power? Is it about weight? Is it about center of gravity? Or is it tick all of those boxes I just mentioned?
Actually, it ticks every one of those boxes. And in this particular scenario with a single seat buggy, trying to keep it light and small, keep the weight down, what we've chosen for this one is a 2.0 LNF Ecotec, Chevy Ecotec motor. It's a turbocharged 4-cylinder, puts out about 220 horsepower, which is not a lot, but it's enough to move this thing around, especially with the gear ratios and like you said, all the multiplication of the gears.
So if we compare this to something like, the very popular LS, which is going to be probably more like double that power, is the weight and the form factor of the LS just not make it manageable or viable as an option?
No, especially in a rear engine, buggy like this. It's designed for lightweight, small maneuverability. You can't put a V8 back there. The weight and the size just wouldn't work.
All right, let's talk through some of the other unique features here. Now, I spotted for a start, you've got a fuel cell that's mounted on the rear axle. And yeah. I mean, I'm not deep in this world, but I've never seen that before. Talk us through that. Is it packaging or is it, again, center of gravity, height of where you've got that mass?
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything. So what we used to do, we would run winches on the rear axle, and then we'd have a radiator behind the motor, and we used to put a fuel cell right behind the driver. So a couple things. Safety-wise, we get the fuel away from the driver. And number two, putting it out there on the axle, it keeps that weight out of your chassis that could be sloshing and moving back and forth, where a 1-pound differential could cause you to slide off something or roll over. I mean, you're literally teetering.
In terms of that, have you got sort of some stats on what sort of angle this truck can sort of deal with before it's going to either tip over or flip over backwards?
Honestly, have no idea what the angle is. You can feel it though when you're sitting in it.
It's starting to get light.
Yeah, it's light. I mean, when you could see that tire, coming off the rock, or especially if you're going straight up or back, a lot of times you'll have to, because you'll be climbing something straight up. You have to slam it in reverse real quick because you're going over backwards and you got to back out of it.
Another unique aspect that I've seen on the truck there is you've got winches front and rear, but these aren't for winching you out of trouble. So explain how these work and how you use them.
Well, like we were just talking about, a lot of times you get in situations where you're going really straight up and you got to make a climb, or you're going to drop off a straight ledge. And what happens is when you're that vertical, you lose the force of gravity, and the shocks now want to just unload and push the car back, which in most scenarios would cause you to go on your lid. So what we do is use the winches as a suck down. So you'll pull that suspension all the way down tight so it cannot unload and push you over. Allows you to make climbs and drops a lot easier.
So you've got that front and rear?
Yes, correct.
Okay. The other aspect with the suspension is it's air suspension, but you've also got the ability, not only with the winches to suck it down, you've also got the ability to basically add pressure and pump it up. So talk us through how that works.
So what we did on these shocks is there's a couple of cars that have done it. And what it is we basically use a 4-way hydraulic control valve off like a tractor. And we tied it into the power steering system, and you can now take that, and we added a reservoir onto the air shocks. So with a piston that separates the hydraulic fluid from the air, and we can now introduce hydraulic fluid into that reservoir, which increases the pressure, which pushes the shocks out. So we can essentially raise and lower the car up to 20 inches.
Okay, so again, just another control that the driver has to deal with. So again, lots of things going on there. Talk us through maybe the electronics package you've got in the vehicle as well. I know it's running a factory ECU for the engine that's been reflashed, but talk us through everything else.
Yeah, everything else we're running ECU Masters PMU 16. So we're running that for all of our power distribution.
So that's power management unit, power distribution unit.
Sorry, yeah. And then we're also running ECU Masters ADU 5 dash. And with those two, we got a couple of Blink keypads in there.
So those are CAN-based keypads, make it real easy to wire up and communicate with the PMU and the dash.
Yeah, the CAN bus is the way to go. I mean, you know, the old school wiring is, I mean, it still has its purpose and its functions, but the CAN bus for something as detailed as this with sensors everywhere and all the functions, you really got to do that. And so that's where ours is.
It begs the question, why are you still running the factory ECU? Is that just through to the direct injection and the limited number of options you've got available?
100%. And then ECU Masters has actually been pretty good. They helped a buddy of mine named Josh develop a DI driver that they've been using. So they've got a couple of them out, and we actually have one on our way for another build that we're doing right now.
I guess again though, you sort of, as you mentioned, you don't really, maximum power is not the key here. You've got enough, so maybe it's not that critical. One of the interesting things we talked about off camera with the front and rear adjustable steering, knowing when particularly the rear is centered without having to turn around and look at the rear axle, and you're using the ADU to help with sort of telling the driver where the axle is. How's that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So the ADU has LED lights across the top, and the beauty with the ECU Master stuff is you can program it to do whatever you want. So we have basically it's a potentiometer on each hub on the front and rear axle that tells us what angle it's at. So as we're controlling it with our electronic buttons and our solenoids, we can see on the dash, we have the LEDs that light up in 25% increments to the right and to the left, changing colors. So in essence, like our yellow button goes left, our green button goes right. So as it goes left, your lights go yellow left and green right. So you know exactly where you're at. And
you've got another button to automatically center the steering as well?
Absolutely. Blue button turns you right back to the middle. No thinking about it, no looking back. And that's where the, really helps in the time constraint of this competition.
Looking at the axles before we started recording, I noticed that potentiometer you're talking about looks suspiciously like a factory ride height sensor. Is that what you've manipulated into there or adapted into there?
That's exactly what it is. It's also our gear selector sensor and everything else. They're very universal.
They just work and they're cheap. Yeah. Look, great to get some insight into what rock crawling is. Admittedly, a type of motorsport that I haven't spent much time watching, but really interesting, and there's a whole bunch of technology packed into this chassis. So thanks for your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
If you like that video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. And if you're not already a subscriber, make sure you're subscribed. We release a new video every week. And if you like free stuff, we've got a great deal for you. Click the link in the description to claim your free spot to our next live lesson.